In a peaceful village surrounded by fields of wildflowers, there lived an elderly lady named Mrs. Eliza. She had spent her entire life caring for her beautiful garden, which was the pride of the village. Her garden bloomed with vibrant flowers, fragrant herbs, and delicious vegetables. Despite her contributions to the community, Mrs. Eliza often felt that her life was ordinary and unremarkable. She would look beyond her village and envy the adventurers who traveled the world and the inventors who created amazing new things. One sunny afternoon, while working in her garden, Mrs. Eliza noticed a young boy named Samuel watching her from the fence. Curious, Samuel approached her, and Mrs. Eliza warmly invited him to help with the garden. Samuel eagerly climbed over the fence, and as they worked together, Mrs. Eliza shared stories of her life in the village. She spoke about the joy of planting seeds, watching them grow, and the satisfaction of harvesting fresh produce. She also talked about the happiness she felt in sharing her garden's bounty with her neighbors. Moved by Mrs. Eliza's dedication, Samuel told her, "Mrs. Eliza, your garden is magical. You make our village beautiful and keep us all fed and happy." Touched by his words, Mrs. Eliza smiled, but confessed that sometimes she felt her life was too ordinary compared to others. Samuel, however, had an idea to show Mrs. Eliza just how special her life truly was. He took Mrs. Eliza by the hand and led her through the village. They visited different homes, and at each stop, someone had a story to tell about how Mrs. Eliza's garden had touched their lives. A woman shared how Mrs. Eliza's herbs had healed her child's illness. An elderly man explained how her flowers had brought him comfort after his wife passed away, and a young couple expressed gratitude for the fresh vegetables during a difficult time. At the end of their walk, Samuel brought Mrs. Eliza to the village square. There, a group of villagers had gathered and created a beautiful display using flowers, herbs, and vegetables from her garden. Samuel explained, "This is our way of saying thank you. You've touched all our lives in ways you may not see, but we see it, and we are grateful." Tears welled up in Mrs. Eliza's eyes as she looked around at the faces of her neighbors, each one reflecting gratitude and love. In that moment, Mrs. Eliza realized that her life was far from ordinary. Her garden was not just a collection of plants, it was a source of life, healing, and joy for the entire village. From that day on, Mrs. Eliza embraced her life with renewed purpose and joy. She tended to her garden with even more love, knowing that every seed she planted and every flower that bloomed made a meaningful difference to her community. Mrs. Eliza's story became a testament to the profound impact of small, everyday actions. She learned to cherish each day and to find greatness in the simple act of nurturing her garden. She never again doubted the worth of her own unique life. This story reminds us that greatness can be found in the everyday moments of kindness and dedication. Mrs. Eliza's humble garden not